The phone call came at 11:43 p.m. on Thanksgiving night. Sophia was in intensive care after falling down concrete stairs at my family's gathering. My mother Linda's voice cut through my panic like ice water. "Jeffrey, you're overreacting." She was drunk and clumsy, that's all. I dropped everything and raced to the hospital, her dismissive words echoing in my head. The last text from Sophia haunted me. "Your mom is acting strange. Something feels wrong." At the hospital, machines beeped rhythmically around my unconscious wife. The doctor's grim expression told me everything. Sophia had severe head trauma and might never wake up. The fluorescent lights of the ICU burned my eyes as I sat beside Sophia's motionless form. Her beautiful face was swollen beyond recognition, purple bruises spreading across her forehead like spilled ink. The ventilator forced air into her lungs with mechanical precision, while monitors tracked every fragile heartbeat. Dr. Martinez pulled me aside with the kind of gentle firmness that comes from delivering bad news too many times. "Mr. Anderson, your wife's injuries are severe. The head trauma suggests multiple impacts, not consistent with a single fall downstairs. We're talking about significant brain swelling, possible permanent cognitive damage if she survives." Multiple impacts. Those words hit me like physical blows. I thought back to the evening, trying to piece together what had happened. Thanksgiving dinner at my childhood home in suburban Denver had been tense from the moment we arrived. Sophia had been nervous about attending because my mother Linda had made no secret of her disapproval since our engagement 6 months ago. Linda wanted me to marry Emma Patterson, the daughter of family friends who had been chasing me since high school. Emma was everything Linda considered appropriate. Blonde, wealthy, from an established Denver family with connections to the country club crowd. Sophia, on the other hand, was a pediatric nurse from a working-class family in Colorado Springs. She was brilliant, compassionate, and made me laugh until my sides hurt. But none of that mattered to my mother. The tension had been building for months. Linda constantly criticized Sophia's career choice, suggesting that nursing was beneath our family's social standing. She made snide comments about Sophia's background, her modest apartment, even her choice of clothing. At family gatherings, Linda would reminisce loudly about how wonderful Emma was, how she and I had been destined for each other since childhood. I had tried to keep the peace, defending Sophia when necessary but avoiding major confrontations. Looking back, I realize how much I had failed her by not setting firmer boundaries with my family. Tonight had been worse than usual. The moment we walked into the colonial-style house I had grown up in, I felt the chill. Uncle Robert, my father's older brother, barely acknowledged Sophia's greeting. Aunt Carol, Robert's wife, offered a thin smile that never reached her eyes. My cousin Brian, who was finishing medical school, made condescending comments about the nursing profession during dinner. My father George seemed uncomfortable with the family's treatment of Sophia, but he stayed silent. He had always been passive when it came to Linda's social maneuvering, choosing to retreat to his study rather than confront conflict. The dinner itself had been a masterclass in passive aggression. Linda served Sophia's plate last, made pointed comments about proper family values, and repeatedly steered conversation toward Emma's recent promotion at her father's law firm. When Sophia tried to help clear dishes, Linda dismissed her with a curt, "I can manage my own kitchen, thank you." Around 9 p.m., after another particularly cruel exchange about knowing one's place in the family hierarchy, Sophia had excused herself to get some fresh air. The back steps led down to Linda's prized garden, a terraced landscape with stone retaining walls that she had spent years perfecting. 10 minutes later, I heard my Aunt Carol scream from the kitchen. I rushed outside to find Sophia crumpled at the bottom of 12 concrete steps, blood pooling beneath her head. She was unconscious, her breathing shallow and irregular. Linda had immediately taken charge, shouting orders about calling 911 while kneeling beside Sophia's body. "She's been drinking too much," Linda told the paramedics when they arrived. "She must have missed the step. You know how these things happen when people don't watch their alcohol consumption." I had been too shocked and terrified to question her account. The paramedics worked efficiently, stabilizing Sophia's neck and loading her onto a stretcher. During the ambulance ride, I held her cold hand and whispered promises that everything would be okay. Now, sitting in this sterile hospital room, the nurse's words shattered my mother's carefully constructed narrative. Mr. Anderson, I need to ask about your wife's alcohol consumption tonight. The blood tests show she was completely sober. Her blood alcohol level was 0.00. The floor seemed to shift beneath my feet. Sophia hadn't been drinking at all. She rarely drank anyway, maybe a glass of wine on special occasions. But tonight she had stuck to sparkling water because she had been feeling queasy earlier in the week. My mother had lied. She had looked the paramedics in the eye and fabricated a story about Sophia being intoxicated, a lie that could have affected her medical treatment. But why would Linda lie about something so easily verified? For the first time since receiving that devastating phone call, I began to question whether Sophia's fall had been as accidental as my family claimed. I spent the next morning at Sophia's bedside, watching the rise and fall of her chest, praying for some sign of consciousness. The neurologist explained that the next 72 hours would be critical. If the swelling in her brain didn't decrease, they might need to perform surgery to relieve the pressure. When I finally returned home to collect some of Sophia's personal items, our small apartment felt hollow and lifeless. Her coffee mug still sat in the sink from Thursday morning, her reading glasses folded neatly on the nightstand beside a half-finished novel. The normalcy of these everyday objects felt surreal against the backdrop of our shattered world. I found Sophia's phone on the dresser and scrolled through her recent messages, looking for any clue about her state of mind before the dinner. What I discovered made my blood run cold. A text conversation with her sister Rachel from earlier that day revealed Sophia's growing anxiety about attending the family gathering. "I don't know why Jeffrey's mom hates me so much," she had written. "Every time we're together, I feel like I'm being watched by a predator. She has this look in her eyes, like she's calculating something." The final message, sent at 8:47 p.m. during dinner, was even more disturbing. "Jeffrey's mom keeps staring at me with this look. I'm going outside to get some air. Something doesn't feel right." That message had been sent just minutes before Sophia's fall. My phone rang constantly throughout the morning. Linda called every hour, each conversation more unsettling than the last. Instead of expressing concern for Sophia's condition, she seemed focused on controlling the narrative. "Jeffrey, you need to stop blaming yourself," she said during one particularly frustrating call. "Sometimes these things just happen. Maybe this is God's way of showing you that Sophia wasn't the right fit for our family." The callousness of her words left me speechless. My wife was fighting for her life, and my mother was suggesting it was some kind of divine intervention. "You know," Linda continued, "Emma has been asking about you constantly since last night. She's so concerned about how you're handling all this stress. Maybe when this is all over, you should consider reconnecting with people who truly understand your background." I hung up on her. By afternoon, I couldn't bear the isolation any longer. I needed to see the place where Sophia had fallen, to try to understand what had happened during those crucial minutes when she was alone outside. The drive to my childhood home took me through familiar neighborhoods where nothing had changed in decades. The same oak trees lined the streets, their bare November branches creating intricate shadows on well-manicured lawns. Everything appeared peaceful and normal, a stark contrast to the chaos consuming my life. The house looked exactly as it had the night before: imposing red brick facade, circular driveway, meticulously maintained landscaping. The back steps where Sophia had fallen were steep concrete slabs, leading down to the garden level. 12 steps total, each one unforgiving stone that could easily cause the kind of traumatic injuries the doctors had described. I knelt at the bottom of the stairs, studying the area where I had found Sophia. A few drops of dried blood stained the concrete, evidence of the violence her body had endured. The steps themselves showed no sign of water or ice that might have caused her to slip. As I examined the scene, a detail I had forgotten suddenly came back to me. My father had installed security cameras around the house several years ago, after a series of break-ins in the neighborhood. A small camera was mounted on the corner of the house, positioned to monitor both the back door and the steps leading to the garden. The camera would have recorded everything. I found my father in his study, hunched over financial paperwork, with the kind of intense focus he used to avoid dealing with family drama. George Anderson had always been more comfortable with numbers than emotions, a trait that had served him well in his accounting practice, but poorly in his marriage to my domineering mother. "Dad, I need to ask you about the security cameras," I said, closing the door behind me. His face immediately tensed, and he avoided meeting my eyes. "What about them, son?" "The camera that monitors the back steps. It would have recorded what happened to Sophia last night." George's hands trembled slightly as he set down his pen. "Jeffrey, I don't think that's a good idea. Sometimes it's better to let sleeping dogs lie. My wife is in intensive care with brain trauma, and you're worried about sleeping dogs?" He sighed heavily and removed his reading glasses, suddenly looking much older than his 62 years. "Your mother made me promise not to mention the cameras. She said it would only upset you more to see footage of Sophia's accident." "She watched the footage?" "Immediately after the paramedics left, Linda said the camera wasn't working properly that night, that it didn't show anything useful. She told me to forget about it. But I could see in his eyes that he was hiding something more. Dad, what aren't you telling me?" After a long moment of internal struggle, he opened his desk drawer and pulled out a small notebook filled with his careful handwriting. "After those break-ins a few years ago, I started backing up all the security footage to cloud storage. I was paranoid about losing important evidence if someone stole the main recording system." My heart started pounding. "You mean the footage from last night still exists?" "Linda doesn't know about the backup system. I never told her because, well, sometimes she does things around the house that she might not want recorded for posterity. Little white lies to neighbors, that sort of thing." He wrote down a web address and login credentials on a piece of paper, his handwriting shaky with nervousness. "Jeffrey, son, are you sure you want to see this? Some truths are better left buried. Your mother can be difficult, but she loves you in her own way." I took the paper from his trembling fingers. "If someone hurt Sophia, I need to know." As I left his study, I heard him whisper, "God help us all." I drove to the nearest coffee shop with strong Wi-Fi, unable to bear the thought of watching the footage in my father's house where Linda might return at any moment. My hands shook as I logged into the cloud storage system and navigated to the files from Thanksgiving night. The security system had multiple camera angles, each saved in 10-minute segments throughout the evening. I found the files covering 8:45 p.m. to 9:15 p.m. and downloaded them to my laptop. The first camera angle showed the back door and top portion of the stone steps. The timestamp read 8:52 p.m. when Sophia appeared in the frame, looking over her shoulder nervously as she stepped outside. She was holding her phone, and I could see her fingers moving across the screen, sending that final text to her sister. Sophia sat down on the top step and leaned against the railing, her body language reflecting exhaustion and stress. She checked her phone again, probably hoping for a supportive response from Rachel. For several minutes, she simply sat there breathing the cold November air, trying to collect herself. At 8:58 p.m., the back door opened again, and my mother stepped outside. What I witnessed next destroyed every assumption I had ever made about the woman who raised me. Linda approached Sophia aggressively, her posture rigid with anger. Even without audio, I could see that she was speaking in sharp, clipped sentences. Sophia's body language immediately became defensive. She stood up and tried to move toward the door, but Linda blocked her path. The confrontation escalated quickly. Linda pointed her finger in Sophia's face while moving closer, forcing my wife backward toward the edge of the steps. Sophia raised her hands in a placating gesture, clearly trying to diffuse the situation. At 9:02 p.m., Uncle Robert emerged from the house and joined the confrontation. Now Sophia was trapped between two hostile family members at the top of a dangerous stairway. Robert grabbed Sophia's arm when she tried to walk past them toward the door. The grip looked painful, and Sophia yanked her arm away. Linda pushed Sophia backward, not hard enough to send her falling, but enough to make her stumble and catch herself against the railing. Sophia's face showed fear now, not just stress. At 9:04 p.m., when Sophia made another desperate attempt to get past them and into the house, Linda and Robert moved in perfect coordination. Robert blocked her path completely, while Linda placed both hands on Sophia's shoulders and shoved with significant force. I watched my wife fall backward down 12 concrete steps, her head striking the sharp edges repeatedly as gravity pulled her toward the garden level. The sickening impacts of skull against stone played out in horrifying detail. Sophia's body came to rest at the bottom, motionless. The aftermath was equally damning. Linda and Robert stood at the top of the steps for several moments, clearly panicking about what they had done. Then Linda took charge with chilling efficiency. She sent Robert inside with urgent whispered instructions while she descended the steps to examine Sophia's unconscious form. Linda kicked dirt over small blood droplets that had spattered on the steps during the fall. She moved Sophia's phone from where it had landed near the house to a position closer to the bottom of the stairs, creating the impression that Sophia had been carrying it when she fell. Only then did Linda scream for help. But there was more footage. I realized the timestamp on this camera only went to 9:07 p.m., but there should be additional angles covering the moments before Linda came outside. With growing dread, I searched for other camera files from the same time period. The second camera angle covered the kitchen window that overlooked the back steps. This footage revealed the truly premeditated nature of what I had witnessed. At 8:51 p.m., while I was presumably in the bathroom upstairs, my cousin Brian appeared at the kitchen window. He was clearly watching Sophia on the steps and signaling to someone else inside the house. Brian used deliberate hand gestures, pointing toward Sophia, then toward the back door, then making a nodding motion. At 8:52 p.m., Emma Patterson entered the frame. My heart sank as I watched the woman my mother had wanted me to marry join Brian at the window. They had a hushed conversation while staring at my wife, and even though I couldn't hear their words, their body language radiated malicious intent. Emma's lips were clearly visible as she spoke. "This ends tonight. She needs to understand she doesn't belong here." The conspiracy was larger than I had imagined. This wasn't a spontaneous argument that had gotten out of hand. Multiple family members had been watching Sophia, planning something, coordinating their actions. I scrolled back further and found footage from 8:45 p.m., covering the period when I had gone upstairs to use the bathroom. What I discovered made me physically ill. The camera captured a quick conference in the dining room between Linda, Robert, Brian, and Emma. They huddled together with the furtive urgency of conspirators, frequently glancing toward the stairs to ensure I wasn't returning. Although the audio was muffled by distance, I could make out Linda's voice. "We need to handle this Sophia situation permanently. Jeffrey will thank us later when he realizes we saved him from making the biggest mistake of his life." The others nodded in agreement. Emma looked particularly vindictive, her face twisted with jealousy and entitlement. Robert asked something I couldn't quite hear, and Linda responded with, "Just follow my lead. Make sure Jeffrey stays occupied until we're finished." As if on cue, Aunt Carol appeared from the living room and immediately engaged me in conversation when I came downstairs from the bathroom. I remembered now how she had suddenly become talkative about my childhood, asking detailed questions about my elementary school teachers and Little League games. At the time, I had thought she was just making pleasant conversation, but now I realized she had been deliberately keeping me distracted while the others prepared to confront Sophia. The final piece of evidence came from phone records I was able to access through our shared family cell plan. Text messages between the conspirators revealed weeks of planning. Linda to Emma, November 15th. "Jeffrey is getting more serious about this girl. We need to act before she completely turns him against his real family." Emma to Linda, November 20th. "I've been patient long enough. I won't lose Jeffrey to some nobody nurse, whatever it takes." Robert to Linda, November 22nd. "Brian thinks we should just talk to Jeffrey directly, but I agree with you. Sometimes you have to protect people from their own bad decisions." Brian to Emma, November 23rd. "Mom wants us all there for Thanksgiving. Says it's time for a family intervention." The most damning message was from Linda to Dr. Harrison, Robert's golf partner and longtime family friend who happened to be an emergency room physician. This text was sent at 9:31 p.m., just 22 minutes after Sophia's accident. Linda to Dr. Harrison. "Terrible accident at family dinner tonight. Jeffrey's girlfriend fell down our back steps. When the EMTs asked questions, should we mention that she seemed impaired? Don't want any liability issues." Dr. Harrison had responded, If she appeared unsteady or disoriented before the fall, definitely mention that to emergency personnel. Helps establish timeline and contributing factors. My mother had been coaching people on how to lie to medical professionals about my wife's condition while Sophia was still bleeding on her stone steps. But I wasn't prepared for what I found next. Hidden deeper in the message history was evidence that this wasn't their first attempt to harm Sophia. 3 weeks earlier, Sophia had been in a minor car accident when her brakes failed while she was driving home from work. She had managed to stop the car using the emergency brake, and fortunately wasn't injured, but the mechanic had said it was strange how both brake lines had developed leaks simultaneously. A text from Robert to Brian from that day read, "Plan A didn't work. We need to try a different approach. They had tried to kill my wife once before. The Thanksgiving confrontation wasn't an intervention that had gotten out of hand. It was Plan B." I sat in that coffee shop for 3 hours, downloading every piece of evidence and organizing it into a comprehensive file. My initial shock had transformed into cold, calculated rage. These people had systematically planned to destroy the woman I loved, and when sabotaging her car hadn't worked, they had escalated to direct violence. I contacted Marcus Webb, an attorney I had found through an online search specializing in family crimes and civil litigation. His office was in downtown Denver, and he agreed to see me that same afternoon on an emergency basis. Marcus was a serious man in his late 40s with graying hair and the kind of steady demeanor that comes from handling difficult cases. When I showed him the security footage and text message evidence, his expression grew increasingly grim. "Mr. Anderson, this is one of the most clear-cut cases of conspiracy and attempted murder I've seen in 20 years of practice," he said after reviewing everything. "The premeditation is obvious. The coordination between multiple parties is documented, and the cover-up attempt is textbook consciousness of guilt." He explained that we had enough evidence to pursue both criminal charges and civil suits. The criminal case would be handled by the district attorney's office, while the civil litigation could target their assets and seek damages for Sophia's medical expenses, lost income, pain and suffering, and punitive damages. "The challenge," Marcus warned, "is that these people know what they did. They'll likely coordinate their stories and hire experienced defense attorneys. We need to move quickly before they have time to mount an effective defense." I authorized him to begin preparing both criminal complaints and civil suits immediately. That evening, I returned to the hospital to find a miracle waiting for me. Sophia's eyes were open, tracking movement around the room with slow, deliberate focus. When she saw me, her face showed recognition despite the swelling and bruising. "Jeffrey," she whispered through dry lips. Her voice was hoarse from the ventilator tube, but it was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. Dr. Martinez was cautiously optimistic. "She's regained consciousness, which is excellent news. However, she's experiencing significant memory loss and some speech difficulties. The brain trauma has affected her ability to form new memories and recall recent events. We'll need to monitor her closely and begin rehabilitation immediately." When I asked Sophia what she remembered about Thanksgiving night, her face scrunched in concentration, but she could only recall fragments. She remembered feeling uncomfortable at dinner and going outside for air, but everything after that was blank. "I remember your mom being mean," she said slowly, struggling with each word. "Always mean, but not what happened after." The doctors explained that traumatic brain injuries often caused memory gaps around the time of the incident. Sophia might never remember the attack itself, which could actually be a blessing. Over the next 2 days, a parade of family members visited the hospital with elaborate displays of concern and support. Linda arrived with an enormous flower arrangement and spent an hour tearfully apologizing to Sophia for not preventing this terrible accident. "I should have warned you about those steps," Linda said, dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "They can be so treacherous at night. I feel just awful that this happened in our home." Uncle Robert brought a fruit basket and made a show of asking about Sophia's rehabilitation needs. Brian offered to consult with her medical team, claiming his medical school training might be helpful. Emma showed up with homemade cookies and a card signed by all your friends who care about your recovery. I watched this performance with growing disgust, but I followed Marcus's advice to remain calm and not reveal what I knew. Each visit gave me another opportunity to observe their behavior and gather additional evidence. What struck me most was how they pumped the medical staff for information. Linda asked detailed questions about Sophia's memory loss and whether she might ever recall the events of that night. Robert inquired about the long-term prognosis and whether Sophia would be able to testify in court if there were any legal proceedings. They weren't just maintaining their cover story. They were conducting intelligence gathering to assess their exposure. During this period, I began wearing a small digital recording device that Marcus had provided. Every conversation with family members was documented, and their words continued to provide damning evidence. The important thing is that we all stick to the same story. Linda told me privately while Sophia was having physical therapy. She was drinking more than usual. She went outside alone, and she fell. Simple accidents happen all the time. No one is to blame. But Mom, she wasn't drinking, I said, testing her reaction. Oh, honey. People can seem sober even when they've had too much. You know how some people hide their alcohol tolerance. The poor thing was probably more affected than any of us realized. She was doubling down on the lie, even when confronted with contradictory evidence. The most revealing conversation happened when Robert visited me at home while Sophia was still hospitalized. He was clearly nervous, sweating despite the cool November weather. "Jeffrey, I want you to know that your mother is just devastated about what happened," he began. "She's been losing sleep, wondering if there was anything she could have done differently." "Like what?" "Well, maybe she should have stopped Sophia from going outside alone, or warned her about how slippery those steps can be after dark. Linda keeps saying she should have been more protective of your wife." He was trying to plant alternative narratives, suggesting that Linda's only mistake was failing to prevent an accident rather than causing one deliberately. "The thing is," Robert continued, "sometimes people blame themselves for random accidents. Linda is worried that if there's any kind of investigation, people might misunderstand her actions that night. You know how these things can get twisted when lawyers get involved." I realized he was probing to see if I intended to pursue legal action. "What kind of lawyers?" I asked innocently. "Oh, you know, ambulance chasers looking for someone to sue. They might try to convince you that the accident was somehow preventable, that the family was negligent or something ridiculous like that. I just want you to know that we've consulted with our insurance company's legal team, and they're confident that everything was handled properly." They had already lawyered up, but Marcus had warned me that they would likely take defensive measures. His investigation had uncovered additional troubling information about my family's background and motives. Emma Patterson had been more obsessed with me than I ever realized. Marcus's private investigator found evidence that she had hired a detective agency to follow me and Sophia over the past 6 months. She had detailed reports about our daily routines, our favorite restaurants, even our weekend activities. Uncle Robert had a history of domestic violence that I had never known about. 2 different women had filed restraining orders against him in the past 10 years, both citing threatening behavior and intimidation tactics. Most disturbing was the discovery of financial motives. Linda had been pressuring me to update my will and life insurance policies, suggesting that I should consider more appropriate beneficiaries than Sophia. She had already consulted with the family attorney about drafting new documents that would make Emma my primary beneficiary. If Sophia had died from her injuries, Emma would have inherited everything, and Linda would have achieved her goal of installing her preferred daughter-in-law. Marcus also uncovered evidence of Linda's previous attempts to control my relationships. 3 former girlfriends from college and my early 20s had similar stories of harassment and manipulation. Linda had contacted their employers, spread rumors about their character, and in one case, convinced a woman's landlord to terminate her lease. The pattern was clear. Linda had been systematically destroying my romantic relationships for years, but Sophia was the first woman who had refused to be intimidated. However, I wasn't prepared for the most shocking revelation yet. During Emma's background investigation, Marcus discovered that she had been undergoing psychiatric treatment for obsessive-compulsive disorder and had been hospitalized briefly 2 years earlier, after what her medical records described as a psychotic episode triggered by romantic rejection. The rejection in question had involved me declining her invitation to be her date at a mutual friend's wedding. Emma wasn't just following Linda's lead. She was driving much of the conspiracy with her own delusional beliefs about our destined relationship. But the investigation revealed something even more sinister. Linda had been planning to have Sophia declared mentally unstable before resorting to physical violence. For 2 months leading up to Thanksgiving, Linda had been documenting alleged incidents of Sophia's erratic behavior. She had written detailed notes about times when Sophia was supposedly rude to service workers, incidents where she allegedly made inappropriate comments about family members, and occasions when she claimed to have witnessed Sophia having emotional outbursts. All of these incidents were completely fabricated, but Linda had been building a paper trail to support a claim that Sophia was mentally unfit and posed a danger to family stability. Linda had already consulted with Dr. Patricia Henley, a psychiatrist known for her willingness to testify in contentious family court cases. Dr. Henley had agreed to evaluate Sophia for potential involuntary commitment based on Linda's fictional documentation. The push down the stairs wasn't a spontaneous escalation of family tension. It was Plan B, implemented when the mental health angle wasn't progressing fast enough for Emma's liking. They had been planning to have my wife locked away in a psychiatric facility, and when that plan moved too slowly, they had tried to murder her instead. Marcus coordinated with District Attorney Susan Collins to execute a simultaneous arrest strategy. The plan was to take all 4 conspirators into custody at the same time to prevent them from coordinating their defense stories or disposing of additional evidence. I insisted on being present when they were arrested. After what they had done to Sophia, I needed to see their faces when they realized their crime had been exposed. We arranged a family dinner under the pretense of coming together during this difficult time and supporting each other through Sophia's recovery. I played the role of grieving husband, seeking comfort from his family, and they eagerly accepted the invitation. The dinner was scheduled for Sunday evening at Linda's house, the same location where they had planned and executed their attack on my wife just 1 week earlier. I arrived early to help with preparations, carrying a small recording device and maintaining the facade of dutiful son. Linda was in an unusually good mood, humming while she prepared her famous pot roast. "I'm so glad you suggested this dinner, Jeffrey," she said while setting the dining room table. "It's important that we don't let this terrible accident tear our family apart. Sophia will need all of our support during her long recovery." The way she emphasized long recovery suggested she knew exactly how severe my wife's injuries were and took satisfaction in the ongoing consequences of their actions. Robert and Carol arrived first, bringing wine and expressing elaborate concern about my emotional state. "You look tired, son," Robert said, placing a paternal hand on my shoulder. "This kind of stress can really wear a person down. You need to make sure you're taking care of yourself, too." Brian came next, full of medical advice about traumatic brain injury rehabilitation and suggestions for specialists who might help Sophia regain her cognitive function. His concerned physician act was particularly galling since I knew he had helped coordinate the attack that caused her injuries. Emma was the last to arrive, carrying a casserole and wearing a black dress that she probably thought made her look appropriately somber. She hugged me with lingering intensity and whispered, "I'm here for whatever you need, Jeffrey. You don't have to go through this alone." The dinner conversation was surreal. They spoke about Sophia with false sympathy while carefully reinforcing their narrative about the tragic accident. Linda mentioned how guilty she felt about the slippery steps. Robert wondered aloud about installing better lighting for safety. Brian suggested that head injuries were sadly common in domestic accidents. Emma was particularly manipulative, steering conversation toward memories of better times when she and I had been close. She reminisced about high school dances, college parties where we had talked until dawn, and family vacations where we had been inseparable. "Do you remember that summer at the lake house when we were 22? She asked with calculated nostalgia. "We talked about what our futures might look like, what kind of life we wanted to build together. Sometimes I think about that conversation and wonder what might have been different if we had been braver about our feelings." I forced myself to smile and nod while internally seething at her audacity. This woman had tried to murder my wife and was now attempting to seduce me at the dinner table. After dessert, when they were all relaxed and confident in their performance, I excused myself to get something from my car. Instead, I texted Marcus, "Ready." When I returned to the dining room, I was carrying my laptop computer. Before we finish tonight, there's something I need to share with all of you, I announced, connecting the laptop to Linda's large television screen. I think it will help us understand exactly what happened to Sophia last Thursday. The confused expressions around the table were almost comical. Linda looked particularly puzzled since she believed the security footage had been destroyed or was unusable. I played the first video file, the clear footage of Linda and Robert confronting Sophia at the top of the back steps. The room fell completely silent as they watched themselves corner my wife and push her down the concrete stairs. Linda's face went through a rapid transformation: confusion, recognition, horror, and finally cold calculation. "That footage is fake," she said immediately. "Someone has manipulated that video to make it look like something happened that never occurred." Robert stood up abruptly, his chair falling backward. "I need to leave. I'm not watching this nonsense." "Sit down, Uncle Robert," I said calmly. "The police are already positioned outside. No one is leaving until we finish watching all the evidence." I played the kitchen window footage, showing Brian and Emma coordinating the timing of the attack. Emma's face crumpled as she heard her own voice saying, "This ends tonight." "Jeffrey, you have to understand," Emma pleaded desperately. "We were trying to protect you. That woman was poisoning you against your family. We could see how she was changing you, making you choose her over people who have loved you your whole life." Brian tried a different approach. "This is being taken completely out of context. We were having a discussion about family dynamics, not planning anything sinister. You're misinterpreting normal family conversations." I played the text message evidence, reading aloud their detailed planning and coordination. Linda's messages about handling the Sophia situation permanently and protecting Jeffrey from his mistake were particularly damning. The final blow was the evidence about the sabotaged car brakes and Dr. Harrison's coaching on how to lie to medical personnel. "You tried to kill her twice," I said, watching their faces as the full scope of their conspiracy became clear. "When destroying her brakes didn't work, you escalated to direct violence." At that moment, Detective Rodriguez and Detective Kim entered through the front door, followed by 6 uniformed officers. "Linda Anderson, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit assault and attempted murder," Detective Rodriguez announced, producing handcuffs. The arrests proceeded methodically. Uncle Robert was charged with assault and conspiracy. Brian faced charges for conspiracy and accessory to attempted murder. Emma's charges included conspiracy, stalking, and accessory to attempted murder. The reactions were exactly what I had hoped to see. Linda remained defiant, screaming that I was destroying my family for that woman and that I would regret this for the rest of my life. Even in handcuffs, she was trying to maintain control and make me feel guilty for seeking justice. Robert broke down completely, sobbing and begging for forgiveness. "It wasn't supposed to go this far," he kept repeating. "We just wanted to scare her into leaving. We never meant for her to get hurt so badly." Brian attempted to maintain his medical school composure, insisting that there had been some terrible misunderstanding and that he would be vindicated once the facts came to light. Emma's reaction was the most disturbing. As the officers led her toward the police car, she turned back to me with eyes that burned with obsessive intensity. "You'll come back to me," she called out. "When you realize what a mistake this all was, when you see that I'm the only one who truly loves you, you'll come back. I'll be waiting, Jeffrey. I'll always be waiting." The delusion was so complete that even arrest and criminal charges couldn't penetrate her fantasy about our destined relationship. As the police cars pulled away from the house, I felt a mixture of relief, satisfaction, and profound sadness. These people had shaped my entire childhood and early adulthood. Despite their monstrous actions, seeing them taken away in handcuffs was painful in ways I hadn't expected. But justice for Sophia was more important than my complicated feelings about family loyalty. The legal proceedings moved quickly due to the overwhelming evidence. All 4 defendants were denied bail due to flight risk and the severity of the charges. Within 2 weeks, additional evidence emerged during the investigation. Police discovered that Emma had been keeping a detailed journal about her obsession with me, including violent fantasies about eliminating obstacles to our relationship. The journal contained specific plans for harming Sophia that went far beyond what they had actually attempted. Linda's computer revealed additional planning documents and research about how to cover up domestic violence incidents. She had been studying legal precedents and police procedures to better evade detection. The civil litigation that Marcus filed was equally devastating to their finances and reputations. We sued for medical expenses, lost wages, pain and suffering, and punitive damages totaling nearly $2 million. Their assets were frozen pending the outcome of both criminal and civil proceedings. The local media picked up the story due to its shocking nature. A wealthy suburban family conspiring to murder their son's wife out of jealousy and social prejudice. The Denver Post ran a front-page article with the headline, "Family Conspiracy. Mother and Relatives Accused of Attempted Murder Plot." Robert lost his construction business when contractors and clients canceled projects following the news coverage. Brian was expelled from medical school after the administration learned about his involvement in a violent conspiracy. Emma's teaching license was suspended pending the outcome of her criminal trial. Linda faced foreclosure on the family home as legal bills mounted, and Robert's financial support disappeared. The country club revoked her membership, and former friends crossed the street to avoid being associated with the scandal. Their carefully constructed social facade had crumbled as completely as their lies. But there was one final revelation that shattered any remaining sympathy I might have felt for them. During Emma's psychological evaluation for sentencing, she confessed to the court-appointed psychiatrist that the car brake incident wasn't their first attempt to harm Sophia. 6 months earlier, Sophia had suffered a severe allergic reaction during a family barbecue that had required emergency room treatment. We had attributed it to an unknown allergen in the food, but Emma now admitted that Linda had deliberately added chopped walnuts to a salad, knowing that Sophia had a severe tree nut allergy. They had been trying to kill my wife for over half a year, using increasingly dangerous methods, until they finally succeeded in causing life-threatening injuries. The knowledge that I had unknowingly exposed Sophia to these predators repeatedly, that I had defended their family loyalty, while they systematically plotted her destruction, would haunt me for years to come. The criminal trials proceeded over the following 6 months, with each defendant attempting different defense strategies that ultimately proved futile against the overwhelming evidence. Linda hired Margaret Fleming, one of Denver's most expensive criminal defense attorneys, who attempted to portray her as a concerned mother whose protective instincts had been twisted by Emma's mental illness. The defense argued that Linda had been manipulated by her unstable future daughter-in-law and had never intended serious harm. This strategy collapsed when prosecutors played recordings of Linda's coldly calculating statements about handling the Sophia situation permanently and her detailed planning to frame Sophia as mentally unstable. Robert's attorney tried to negotiate a plea bargain by having him testify against the others, but the prosecution already had sufficient evidence and refused to offer significant concessions. Robert ultimately pled guilty to assault and conspiracy charges in exchange for a reduced sentence. Brian maintained his innocence throughout the trial, claiming he had been an unwilling participant who feared defying his mother and uncle. However, his active role in coordinating the timing of the attack and his medical knowledge of how to create believable accident scenarios undermined his claims of reluctant involvement. Emma's defense was the most complex due to her documented mental health issues. Her attorney argued that she was not competent to stand trial due to her obsessive-compulsive disorder and previous psychiatric hospitalization. Court-appointed psychiatrists determined that while Emma suffered from significant mental illness, she understood the nature and consequences of her actions and was legally responsible for her choices. The prosecution, led by Assistant District Attorney Michael Torres, methodically presented the evidence of premeditation, coordination, and cover-up. The security footage was devastating. The text message documentation was comprehensive, and the pattern of escalating attempts to harm Sophia painted a clear picture of determined malice. I testified for 3 days about the family dynamics, the pressure I had faced to end my relationship with Sophia, and the systematic campaign of harassment they had conducted. Describing Sophia's injuries and ongoing struggles with memory loss and speech difficulties was emotionally brutal, but I forced myself to remain composed and factual. The most powerful testimony came from Sophia herself. Although her speech remained somewhat impaired, She was able to describe the months of psychological intimidation she had endured from my family. Her courage in facing her attackers in court was inspiring and heartbreaking. "They wanted me to disappear," she said slowly, choosing each word carefully due to her ongoing cognitive challenges. "Not just leave Jeffrey, but disappear completely. When I wouldn't break, they tried to break my body instead." The verdicts were unanimous and swift. Linda Anderson, guilty of conspiracy to commit assault, attempted murder, and witness tampering. Sentenced to 8 years in state prison. Robert Anderson, guilty of assault, conspiracy, and accessory to attempted murder. Sentenced to 6 years in state prison. Brian Anderson, guilty of conspiracy and accessory to attempted murder. Sentenced to 4 years in state prison. Emma Patterson, guilty of conspiracy, attempted murder, stalking, and accessory to attempted murder. Sentenced to 4 years in state prison with mandatory psychological treatment. All 4 received lifetime restraining orders prohibiting any contact with Sophia or me. The civil litigation concluded with a settlement of $1.8 million, ensuring that their financial resources would be completely exhausted by legal fees and damages. Linda lost the family home, Robert's business was liquidated to pay judgments, and Emma's family was forced to sell property to cover her portion of the settlement. But the legal victories, satisfying as they were, couldn't undo the damage to our lives. Sophia's recovery was slow and incomplete. 6 months after the attack, she had regained most of her speech function, but continued to struggle with memory formation and concentration. Simple tasks that had once been effortless now required significant mental effort. She was forced to take extended leave from her job as a pediatric nurse because the cognitive demands of monitoring multiple patients and calculating medication dosages were beyond her current capabilities. The loss of her career was devastating to someone who had dedicated her life to caring for sick children. The medical bills, even after insurance coverage and the civil settlement, were staggering. Sophia required months of intensive rehabilitation, speech therapy, occupational therapy, and neurological monitoring. We were fortunate that the settlement provided financial security, but money couldn't buy back her lost abilities. The emotional trauma was equally challenging. Sophia suffered from anxiety attacks and difficulty trusting new people. She became hypervigilant about her surroundings and often startled at unexpected sounds or movements. The woman who had once been outgoing and confident now struggled with crowds and social situations. My own psychological recovery was complicated by guilt and anger. I blamed myself for not protecting Sophia from people I should have recognized as threats. The signs of their hostility had been obvious in retrospect, but my desire to maintain family harmony had blinded me to the true danger they posed. I also struggled with profound grief for the family I thought I had known. Despite their monstrous actions, these people had been central to my identity for 32 years. Learning that my mother was capable of attempted murder, that my uncle and cousin would participate in violence against an innocent woman, that Emma's love for me was actually dangerous obsession, it forced me to question everything I thought I knew about my own life. The support system that most people take for granted was gone. I had no family to turn to during the most difficult period of my life. Friends and colleagues were supportive, but struggled to understand the magnitude of betrayal we had experienced. But there were unexpected sources of hope and healing. My father, George, had filed for divorce from Linda within weeks of her arrest. He was horrified by the revelation of her true nature and spent months in therapy trying to understand how he had lived with someone capable of such calculated cruelty for over 30 years. George became a devoted ally in Sophia's recovery, visiting the hospital daily and later helping with her rehabilitation appointments. He had always been passive in family conflicts, but his guilt over enabling Linda's behavior motivated him to become the protective father figure I had needed my entire life. "I failed you both by staying silent when I should have spoken up," he told me, during one of many difficult conversations about our family's dysfunction. "I knew your mother was controlling and manipulative, but I chose peace over principle. I'll spend the rest of my life trying to make up for that cowardice." George's support was crucial during the legal proceedings and Sophia's recovery. He testified against Linda at trial, providing additional evidence about her controlling behavior and confirming details about the security system. His willingness to choose justice over loyalty to his wife was a powerful example of moral courage. The nursing community also rallied around Sophia in ways that restored some of our faith in human goodness. Her colleagues at Children's Hospital organized fundraisers to supplement our medical expenses and provided emotional support during her darkest moments of despair about her cognitive limitations. Dr. Patricia Williams, the head of pediatric nursing, personally advocated for Sophia's eventual return to work in whatever capacity her recovery would allow. "We don't abandon our own," she told Sophia, during one particularly difficult therapy session. "When you're ready, we'll find a role that fits your abilities. You're still a brilliant nurse, even if some things are harder now." Most importantly, our marriage became stronger despite the trauma we had endured. Sophia's brush with death had clarified what truly mattered in our lives. The petty concerns that had once seemed important, career advancement, social status, family approval, were revealed as meaningless compared to our love for each other. Sophia's courage throughout her recovery was inspiring. She faced each day of painful rehabilitation with determination, celebrating small victories and refusing to surrender to despair when progress was slow. "They tried to destroy me," she said during one of our evening walks around the neighborhood, her speech still careful but increasingly confident. "But they didn't succeed. I'm different now. Maybe not as quick as I used to be. But I'm still here. I'm still me. And I still love you." Her resilience taught me about the difference between being broken and being changed. Sophia had been injured but not defeated, altered but not diminished in the ways that truly mattered. The experience also clarified my own values and priorities in ways that would shape the rest of our lives. 18 months after that terrible Thanksgiving night, I stood in the kitchen of our new home, watching Sophia prepare breakfast, with the careful concentration she now brought to every task. Her movements were deliberate and measured, accommodating the processing delays that remained from her brain injury, but her smile was genuine and peaceful. We had moved to Colorado Springs, closer to Sophia's family and farther from the memories that haunted our old neighborhood. The house was smaller than our previous apartment, but filled with warmth and hope in ways our old life had never achieved. Sophia had returned to nursing in a modified capacity, working with the hospital's patient education program where she taught families how to care for children with chronic illnesses. Her slower pace of speech and enhanced empathy, developed through her own recovery experience, made her exceptionally effective in this role. Parents found comfort in her gentle explanations and obvious understanding of medical challenges. I had left my corporate marketing job and completed an accelerated program in family advocacy law. Marcus Webb had offered me a position with his firm specializing in domestic violence and family conspiracy cases. Our shared experience had prepared me to help other victims navigate the legal system and seek justice against abusive family members. My father George had sold his accounting practice and moved to Colorado Springs as well, determined to rebuild his relationship with us and become the grandfather he hoped our future children would need. His transformation from passive enabler to active protector was remarkable, and his presence in our lives provided stability and continuity that helped heal some of the wounds left by the rest of my family's betrayal. The criminal sentences were being served as intended. Linda had been denied parole after serving only 18 months, with the parole board citing her continued lack of remorse and ongoing threats against Sophia. Uncle Robert had attempted suicide in prison and was receiving psychiatric treatment while serving the remainder of his sentence. Brian had lost his appeal and was completing his 4-year sentence with good behavior. Emma remained in a psychiatric facility within the prison system, still maintaining her delusional belief that I would eventually return to her. None of them would be eligible for release for several more years, and the restraining orders would remain in effect permanently. The civil settlement had provided financial security that allowed us to focus on recovery and rebuilding without economic stress. More importantly, it had sent a clear message that wealthy families could not escape consequences for their crimes through social connections and expensive attorneys. Our story had attracted attention from other victims of family conspiracy and domestic manipulation. I testified before the Colorado State Legislature in support of enhanced penalties for family violence and improved training for medical personnel to recognize coordinated abuse scenarios. The Denver Post had followed up with anniversary articles about our case, highlighting changes in law enforcement protocols and medical procedures that resulted from the evidence we had presented. Several other families had come forward with similar stories of systematic abuse disguised as family loyalty. But the most meaningful changes were personal rather than systemic. Sophia was pregnant with our first child, a daughter we planned to name Grace after Sophia's grandmother, who had raised her with the kind of unconditional love neither of us had experienced from my family. The pregnancy had proceeded without complications, and doctors expected no cognitive development issues related to Sophia's brain injury. She's going to grow up knowing that family means protection and love, not manipulation and control, Sophia said, placing her hand on her growing belly. No one will ever make her choose between loyalty and truth. We had discussed at length how to raise children with healthy boundaries and clear values after experiencing such profound family dysfunction. Our daughter would learn that respect must be earned, that love should never require silence about harmful behavior, and that standing up for what's right sometimes means standing alone. The pregnancy had also highlighted the full scope of what my family had tried to steal from us. They hadn't just attempted to murder Sophia, they had tried to prevent our children from being born, to eliminate the future we had planned together, to ensure that Emma's obsession would triumph over genuine love. The knowledge that my mother had been willing to kill the woman who would bear her grandchildren, that she had valued social status more than human life, remained incomprehensible to me. But I had stopped trying to understand evil and focused instead on building something beautiful from the wreckage they had created. Our new community in Colorado Springs embraced us with warmth that felt foreign after years of navigating my family's conditional affection. Neighbors helped with yard work during Sophia's difficult pregnancy days. Colleagues covered extra shifts when she had medical appointments, and strangers at the grocery store smiled without hidden agendas. We attended a small church where the pastor spoke about forgiveness and healing, without requiring us to reconcile with people who remain dangerous. Forgiveness doesn't mean relationship, he explained during one particularly relevant sermon. You can release your anger without exposing yourself to continued harm. That distinction had been crucial to our emotional recovery. We had worked through our rage and grief in therapy, learning to let go of bitterness while maintaining appropriate caution about future relationships. 6 months earlier, I had received a letter from Linda in prison. The envelope sat unopened on my desk for 3 weeks before I finally read it. Her message was exactly what I had expected, a manipulative attempt to reframe her actions as misguided love, combined with demands that I forgive her for the sake of family unity and promises that she had learned from her mistakes. There was no genuine remorse, no acknowledgement of the severity of what she had done, no understanding of the permanent damage she had caused to Sophia's health and our sense of security. The letter was another attempt to control and manipulate, written from prison but unchanged in its essential selfishness. I showed the letter to Sophia, and we decided together not to respond. Linda would interpret any contact as an opening for continued manipulation. Our silence was the clearest possible message that her actions had permanently severed any relationship between us. Emma had also attempted contact through mutual friends and social media, but her messages revealed the same delusional thinking that had motivated her participation in the conspiracy. She continued to believe that Sophia had tricked me into marriage, and that her violent actions had been justified attempts to save me from a mistake. The restraining orders had been necessary and effective, but the real protection came from our decision to build a new life, in a new place, surrounded by people who valued honesty and kindness. As I watched Sophia teach our prenatal class about child development, her patience and knowledge evident despite the cognitive challenges she still faced, I marveled at the strength that had emerged from our shared trauma. We had learned to protect each other in ways that went far beyond physical safety, creating emotional security that could withstand whatever challenges the future might bring. Our daughter would grow up in a home where love was demonstrated through action rather than words, where family loyalty meant protecting each other from harm rather than enabling destructive behavior, where standing up for what's right was more important than maintaining false peace. The life lesson that emerged from our ordeal was both simple and profound. Family is defined by love and respect, not blood relations. True loyalty means protecting the innocent from harm, even when the perpetrators share your DNA. And sometimes the greatest act of love is having the courage to seek justice against those who claim to love you while trying to destroy what you cherish most. We had learned that betrayal by family members cuts deeper than any other wound, but healing is possible when you choose to surround yourself with people who value your well-being over their own convenience. The family we were creating for our daughter would be built on honesty, protection, and genuine care rather than manipulation, control, and conditional affection. Standing in our kitchen on this peaceful Sunday morning, watching my pregnant wife prepare breakfast while my father played classical music in the living room and worked on a crossword puzzle, I felt gratitude for the life that had emerged from such darkness. Linda's attempt to destroy our happiness had ultimately led us to discover a deeper, more authentic form of joy. Justice had been served, healing was ongoing, and our future was filled with possibility rather than fear. Before I finish today, I want to ask you something that's been on my heart since sharing this story. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and protecting someone you love? When is it time to stop making excuses for harmful behavior just because it comes from relatives? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below because these situations are more common than we might think, and sometimes hearing other people's experiences helps us find the courage to do what's right. If this story resonated with you, or if you know someone who might benefit from hearing it, please take a moment to like this video. Subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories about overcoming family dysfunction, and share it with others who might need to know they're not alone in facing these impossible choices. Thank you for listening to our journey with such patience and understanding. I hope Sophia's courage and our story of finding justice might inspire anyone facing similar struggles to trust their instincts, seek help when needed, and never give up on the possibility of building a better life. May you always have the wisdom to recognize genuine love from manipulation, the strength to protect what matters most, and the peace that comes from choosing truth over comfortable lies.